The stadium lights had barely dimmed on another World Cup night when the whispers started. Not about a golden goal, not about a shock elimination, about panic, real panic. Inside conference rooms in Zurich, inside training complexes across Munich, Manchester, and Madrid, a different kind of tension was building, one that had nothing to do with tactics on the pitch and everything to do with the bodies standing on it. Because right now, in the middle of the biggest World Cup in history, Europe's football powers are pushing back hard. And if you think that doesn't affect what you're watching on the field, you're about to understand just how wrong that assumption is. Let's rewind for a second, because to understand why this tournament feels different, heavier, more physical, more chaotic in the best and worst ways, you need to understand the machine behind it. FIFA World Cup 2026 is not just bigger, it is the biggest transformation the tournament has ever undergone. 48 teams, 3 host nations, a record-breaking 104 matches. For the first time in history, players are stepping onto pitches in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, adapting to different altitudes, different climates, different turf conditions, sometimes within the same week. And that is exactly where the story begins. Because while fans are experiencing pure joy, more nations, more dreams, more Cinderella stories than ever before, many of Europe's top clubs and national federations have been sounding the alarm for months about something far less glamorous: the physical toll on their players. Picture this. A midfielder finishes a grueling club season in May, Champions League, domestic title race, cup finals, no real off-season. Then, within days, he's on a plane to North America, adjusting to a different continent, different time zones, and a football calendar that keeps expanding without ever giving these athletes room to breathe. This is the real storyline running underneath the World Cup 2026 spectacle. Not politics, not boardroom drama. Football fatigue, player welfare, the sustainability of the modern game. And on the pitch, you can see it. Look at how many high-profile players have gone down with muscular injuries in just the group stage. Look at how many coaches have been forced into early rotations not because of tactical creativity, but because of sheer physical necessity. This tournament has already produced more soft tissue injuries in the first 2 rounds of group matches than the entire group stage of Qatar 2022. That is not a coincidence. That is a warning sign written in hamstring strains and pulled muscles. Now, here's where the tension escalates. Several of Europe's biggest clubs have made it clear, through their federations, that they see this expanded calendar as unsustainable. 32 teams was already a demanding format. 48, spread across a wider footprint, with more travel and less recovery time, has pushed elite performance to its breaking point. And when the players who generate the biggest transfer fees, the biggest broadcast numbers, and the biggest global storylines start breaking down physically, everyone pays attention. This is why you're seeing tactical approaches shift in real time during this tournament. Teams that traditionally play a high-press, high-intensity style have been forced to recalibrate. Historically, that identity has defined the way major European nations approach international football: suffocating pressure, rapid transitions, relentless movement off the ball. But watch closely in this World Cup and you'll notice something different. More conservative structures in the middle third, more controlled possession instead of chaotic pressing triggers. Coaches are quietly protecting their players from themselves, dialing down intensity levels that would have been non-negotiable just 1 tournament cycle ago. That single tactical shift is rewriting entire group stage narratives. Take a look at how certain heavyweight nations have opened this tournament. Slower build-up, more patience in possession, substitution patterns that prioritize legs over rhythm. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't a coaching philosophy shift born from tactical inspiration. It's damage control. And damage control changes everything about how a World Cup unfolds. Let's talk numbers, because the statistics tell a story just as dramatic as anything happening in the stands. In the opening round of matches, average sprint distance per player dropped compared to the last 2 World Cup cycles. high-intensity runs, the explosive bursts that create goals, that break defensive lines, that turn ordinary matches into unforgettable ones have decreased noticeably among squads that played extended domestic seasons. Meanwhile, teams from federations with shorter, less congested league calendars are showing up fresher, sharper, and more explosive in the final 20 minutes of matches. This is producing one of the most fascinating subplots of World Cup 2026, freshness versus experience. Nations with less battle-tested squads but significantly more physical energy are matching up against continental giants who are technically superior but running on fumes. We saw this dynamic collide dramatically in one of the tournament's most talked-about group stage matches, where a heavily fancied European powerhouse was pushed to the brink by a team many pundits had dismissed before a ball was even kicked. The underdogs pressed with ferocious energy in the final stretch, capitalizing on visibly heavy legs from their more decorated opponents. What should have been a routine victory turned into a nervy, backs-against-the-wall survival act. That match wasn't just an isolated shock, it was a preview of what fatigue-driven football can produce on the biggest stage in the sport. Now, let's zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, because this isn't just about one team or one match. This is about how the entire tournament trajectory could be reshaped. If fatigue continues to be a defining factor, expect knockout stage football to look dramatically different from what we're used to. Extra time could become more chaotic, more mistake-prone, more unpredictable than ever. Penalty shootouts, already a lottery of nerves, may become even more decisive as legs give out before minds do. Coaches who build the deepest, most versatile squads, rather than relying on a core of superstar starters, may hold a massive tactical advantage heading into the business end of the tournament. This changes how we should be watching every remaining fixture. Instead of just asking who has the better starting 11, the smarter question becomes who has the freshest 23. Substitution strategy, squad rotation, and recovery management are no longer background details. They are now central pillars of World Cup success in 2026. And this brings us to one of the most compelling storylines of the tournament, the coaches themselves. Managers who once prided themselves on rigid tactical systems and unchangeable starting lineups are being forced into flexibility. The elite World Cup winning coaches of this era are not the ones clinging stubbornly to a single system. They are the adaptive minds, willing to rotate key players even in must-win matches, willing to sacrifice short-term rhythm for long-term physical sustainability. Historically, we've seen tournaments won by teams that peaked at exactly the right moment. 2010 Spain's suffocating control, 2014 Germany's ruthless efficiency, 2018 France's explosive counters, 2022 Argentina's emotional inevitability. Each of those triumphs had a defining tactical identity that carried them from the group stage to the final whistle of the final. World Cup 2026 may be remembered differently, not for one dominant tactical revolution, but for management of the modern football calendar itself. The teams still standing in the final rounds may not be the most talented on paper. They may simply be the ones who managed fatigue, rotation, and recovery better than everyone else. That is a fascinating, almost unprecedented storyline for a World Cup to be built around. Now let's talk about what this means emotionally, because statistics and tactics only tell half the story. The other half lives in the stadiums themselves. Picture the atmosphere inside these new, colossal North American venues. Fans from nations who have waited generations for a World Cup moment, packed shoulder to shoulder, flags draped over shoulders, chants echoing off record-setting attendance figures. For many of these supporters, this World Cup represents something deeply personal, a validation of years of hope, of heartbreak, of near misses in previous qualification cycles. And now imagine watching your nation's biggest stars, the players who carried your emotional investment through years of waiting, visibly gassed by the 60th minute. Imagine the collective anxiety rippling through tens of thousands of fans as their talismanic playmaker signals to the bench, unable to continue at full intensity. That tension,
That vulnerability adds a raw human layer to this tournament that previous, less physically demanding World Cups simply didn't have. Because this World Cup isn't just testing tactical systems, it's testing human limits. And there is something profoundly compelling about watching elite athletes fight through exhaustion, through cramping legs and heavy breathing, refusing to let their bodies betray their dreams in real time. That's not politics. That's not controversy for controversy's sake. That is the purest, most dramatic essence of sport. Human beings pushing themselves past reasonable limits because a World Cup only comes around once every 4 years, and nobody wants to look back with regret.
So where does this leave us as we move deeper into the knockout stages? Every match from this point forward carries a hidden subplot beneath the surface. Watch which teams look sharp in the final 15 minutes. Watch which coaches make bold rotation decisions before must-win fixtures. Watch which nations have built squads deep enough to survive the accumulated physical toll of this unprecedented, expanded format. Because the team that lifts the trophy in this World Cup may not just be the most talented, they may be the most resilient, the most physically prepared, the most tactically adaptable to an entirely new rhythm of international football. This is the story we're all watching unfold in real time, whether we realized it or not. Beneath the incredible goals, the last-minute drama, the record-breaking attendances, there's a quieter, more strategic battle taking place, a battle for freshness, for depth, for survival across an unprecedented football marathon. And as we move toward the final rounds of this tournament, that battle is only going to intensify. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think fatigue and squad rotation will ultimately decide who wins this World Cup, more than raw talent alone? Which national team do you believe has built the deepest, most sustainable squad to survive this brutal new format all the way to the final? And finally, has this expanded, more physically demanding World Cup made the tournament more exciting for you as a fan, or has it come at too high a cost for the players themselves? Drop your thoughts, because this World Cup story is far from finished, and the next chapter could completely reshape everything we think we know about how tournaments are won.